Sarah Johnson's day had started like any other Tuesday. The spring air was warm, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the clean streets of Millbrook Heights, a peaceful suburban neighborhood where she had lived for the past 5 years. At 34, Sarah had worked hard to build her dream, a successful boutique called Style and Grace that served customers from all over the city. It was 5:30 p.m. when Sarah locked up her boutique. She smiled, thinking about the successful day she'd had, including selling 3 expensive designer dresses to a bride and her bridesmaids. Her dark blue Mercedes, a car she had bought just 6 months ago to celebrate her business's 5th anniversary, was parked in its usual spot behind the store. The route home was one she knew by heart. 15 minutes through familiar streets, past the old library, and through the quiet neighborhoods where children played in their front yards. Sarah had just turned onto Maple Avenue, only 10 minutes from her house, when she noticed the police cruiser following her. She checked her speed, 32 miles per hour in a 35 zone, and made sure she was driving perfectly within the lines. The red and blue lights suddenly flashed in her rearview mirror. Sarah's heart sank, but she remained calm. This wasn't her first experience with law enforcement, and she knew exactly what to do. She turned on her right blinker, slowly pulled over to a well-lit spot near a corner store, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Through her side mirror, Sarah watched as 2 officers emerged from their patrol car. The taller one, who would later identify himself as Officer Brady, approached her window while his partner, Officer Martinez, stood slightly behind. Sarah noticed something off about their body language. They seemed tense, almost aggressive, even though she had followed every proper procedure for a traffic stop. "License and registration," Officer Brady barked, not even bothering with a greeting. His hand rested on his holster, a detail that didn't escape Sarah's notice. "Yes, officer," Sarah replied politely, keeping her voice steady. "My license is in my purse on the passenger seat, and the registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now, if that's okay." Officer Brady nodded curtly, his eyes narrowing as he watched her careful movements. Sarah retrieved her documents with deliberate slowness, making sure her actions were clear and non-threatening. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed over her license and registration, but her face remained composed. "Do you know why I pulled you over, Mrs. Johnson?" Officer Brady asked, studying her documents with unnecessary intensity. "No, officer, I don't," Sarah responded truthfully. "I was following all traffic laws and driving carefully." Officer Martinez had moved closer now, shining his flashlight into her car even though it was still daylight. "Nice car," he commented, his tone suggesting there was something suspicious about a black woman driving a Mercedes. "Yes, I bought it recently. I own a boutique downtown, Style and Grace," Sarah explained, though she knew she shouldn't have to justify her success to anyone. Officer Brady returned with her documents, but instead of letting her go, he began asking more questions. Where was she coming from? Where was she going? Did she live in this neighborhood? Did she have any weapons or drugs in the car? Each question felt more accusatory than the last. Sarah answered each question calmly and clearly, even as her anxiety grew. She could feel the stares of passersby, some slowing down to watch the scene unfold. A young mother hurried her children across the street, avoiding eye contact. Sarah felt the familiar sting of humiliation, but kept her dignity intact. "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Brady suddenly demanded. "May I ask why, officer?" Sarah's voice remained steady, but her heart was racing. "Have I done something wrong?" "I said step out of the vehicle," Brady repeated, his hand again moving to his holster. "We've received reports of drug trafficking in this area, and your vehicle matches a description." Sarah knew this was a lie. Her car was only 6 months old, and there hadn't been any drug-related incidents in this neighborhood in years. She was about to reach for her phone to call her husband, Marcus, when she noticed Officer Martinez was already circling her car, his eyes fixed on the trunk. The situation was escalating, and Sarah could feel it in her bones. This wasn't going to be a routine traffic stop. Taking a deep breath, she reached for her phone, making sure the officers could see her movements. She needed to document whatever was about to happen next. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she pressed the record button on her phone. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, and the air felt heavy with tension. Officer Brady noticed her movement and his face darkened. Put that phone down, he commanded, his voice sharp and threatening. I told you to step out of the vehicle. Officer, I respectfully decline. I have the right to record this interaction, Sarah replied, her voice calm but firm. She remembered everything her husband Marcus had taught her about dealing with law enforcement. I'd like to know why I was stopped, and I'd like to call my lawyer. Officer Martinez had already moved to the passenger side of her Mercedes, peering through the windows with his flashlight despite the daylight. His lips curled into a sneer as he tapped on the glass with his knuckles. Pretty nice car for someone coming from a small boutique, he said, his tone dripping with suspicion. Sarah kept her phone steady, recording everything. More cars were slowing down now, and a small crowd had begun to gather on the sidewalk. Some people had their phones out too, sensing that something wasn't right about this traffic stop. Last warning, Officer Brady growled, reaching for her door handle. Step out, or we'll have to remove you forcefully. Sarah's heart pounded, but she remained composed. Officer, I'm a business owner in this community. My husband is an attorney. I've done nothing wrong, and I don't consent to any searches. Please tell me why I was stopped. Instead of answering, Officer Brady yanked her door open. The sudden movement made Sarah flinch, but she kept recording. Officer Martinez was already calling for backup on his radio, claiming they had an uncooperative subject. Fine, you want to know why you were stopped. Brady's voice was loud now, performing for the growing audience. Your right taillight is out. Sarah knew this was a lie. She had just had her car serviced last week. Officer, my taillights are working perfectly. You can check them yourself. But the officers weren't interested in checking. Martinez had moved to the trunk, demanding she open it. We received reports of suspicious activity in this area. Pop the trunk. I do not consent to any searches, Sarah repeated, her lawyer husband's words echoing in her mind. She pressed a button on her phone, starting a live stream to her social media account. The number of viewers began to climb rapidly. The situation was spiraling. Officer Brady reached into her car, trying to grab her phone. Sarah held firm, knowing her rights. Please don't touch me or my property. I'm not resisting, but I know my rights. A third police car arrived, its sirens wailing. The new officer, a younger man named Thompson, approached the scene with his hand on his holster. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown larger, with many people recording now. This is harassment, Sarah stated clearly for her recording. I'm a law-abiding citizen being targeted without cause. I want to speak to a supervisor. Officer Brady's face was red with anger. Exit the vehicle now, or we'll charge you with obstruction. Sarah remained calm but firm. I'll exit when a supervisor arrives. I don't feel safe with the way you're treating me. Martinez had somehow obtained keys to her car. Sarah hadn't even seen how, and was already opening her trunk. The sound made her stomach drop. She watched through her rearview mirror as he began roughly tossing her belongings around. Hey, there's something back here. Martinez called out, his voice filled with fake excitement. He emerged holding a gas can, the emergency can Sarah always kept in her trunk for safety. What's this for? Brady demanded, as if carrying a gas can was a crime. It's an emergency gas can. Many people carry them, Sarah had explained, her voice steady despite her rising fear. Please stop searching my vehicle. I don't consent to this search. The live stream comments were flooding in now. People were asking where this was happening, promising to come help. Sarah could see some familiar faces in the growing crowd, neighbors, customers from her boutique, people who knew her as a respected business owner. Officer Thompson approached her window. Ma'am, you need to stop being difficult. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Sarah took a deep breath, keeping her phone steady. I choose the legal way, she replied. And I'm still waiting for your supervisor. The tension in the air was electric. Sarah could feel that something bad was about to happen, but she never imagined just how far these officers would go to abuse their power. The gas can in Officer Martinez's hands became the center of attention. He swung it carelessly, and Sarah could hear the liquid sloshing inside. She had filled it just last week, wanting to be prepared for emergencies during her long drives to meet clothing suppliers. Look what we got here, Martinez announced loudly, playing to the growing crowd. A full container of gasoline. Seems suspicious to me. He pretended to stumble, deliberately tipping the can. Gasoline spilled onto the pavement, creating a dangerous puddle near Sarah's car. "Please be careful," Sarah called out, her voice thick with concern. "That's dangerous." Her phone continued recording, capturing every moment of the officer's reckless behavior. The live stream now had over 1,000 viewers, with comments flooding and expressing outrage at what they were witnessing. Officer Brady smirked, moving closer to her window. Well, carrying dangerous materials in your vehicle. That's a serious offense, Mrs. Johnson." His tone was mocking, making it clear he was enjoying this abuse of power. Sarah remained composed, though her heart was racing. "It's not illegal to carry an emergency gas can. Many drivers do. Please stop spilling it. You're creating a hazard." She glanced at her phone screen, noting that someone had tagged her husband Marcus in the comments. Help would be coming soon. The young officer, Thompson, looked uncomfortable with the situation but said nothing to stop his colleagues. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, occasionally glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. More gas splashed onto the ground as Martinez continued his act. "Oops," he said with fake innocence. "It's kind of slippery out here." The strong smell of gasoline filled the air, making several bystanders cover their noses. Sarah pressed the speed dial for Marcus's office while keeping her live stream running. The phone rang once before Officer Brady reached through her window, trying to grab it. "That's it. You're interfering with a police investigation." "Don't touch me or my phone," Sarah said firmly, pulling back. "I'm calling my lawyer, which is my right. Everything you're doing is being recorded." A voicemail from Marcus's office started playing on speaker. "You've reached the law offices of Marcus Johnson, civil rights attorney. If this is an emergency." The officer's demeanor shifted slightly at the word attorney, but they were too far into their power trip to back down now. Martinez had emptied nearly half the gas can around Sarah's car, creating a dangerous situation. "This vehicle is now a public hazard," Brady announced loudly. "We'll have to impound it. Exit the vehicle immediately." Sarah's boutique assistant, Tanya, appeared in the crowd. She had seen the live stream and rushed over from the shop. "I'm calling the fire department," Tanya shouted, pulling out her phone. "You can't do this." Officer Brady turned toward the crowd. "Everyone stay back. This is a police matter." But more phones were recording now, capturing every illegal action. Sarah could hear sirens in the distance, but they weren't police sirens. Someone had indeed called the fire department. Officer Thompson finally spoke up. "Maybe we should wait for backup." But Brady cut him off with a sharp look. Martinez dropped the now empty gas can near Sarah's trunk. The precious fuel she kept for emergencies was now a dangerous puddle around her car. The afternoon sun beat down on the scene, and Sarah could feel sweat running down her back despite the car's air conditioning. "Last chance," Brady threatened, reaching for his handcuffs. "Exit the vehicle, or we'll add resisting arrest to your charges." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "I'm 5 minutes away. Don't get out. Keep recording. Backup is coming." The crowd had swelled to nearly 50 people now. Some were chanting "Leave her alone," while others called out, "We're all recording." The situation was spiraling out of control, but the officers seemed past the point of caring about consequences. Officer Brady pulled out a cigarette and lit it, a clear violation of safety protocols around spilled gasoline. His eyes locked with Sarah's in the rearview mirror, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't just angry anymore, he was dangerous. "Such a shame," Brady said, taking a long drag from his cigarette. "Such a nice car, too. But you know how these things go. Accidents happen all the time." Sarah's hands gripped her phone tighter, her knuckles white with tension. She knew what was coming next, but she could never have prepared herself for just how far these officers would go to assert their twisted version of authority. The lit cigarette dangled carelessly from Officer Brady's fingers as he circled Sarah's car. The gasoline fumes hung thick in the air, creating a dangerous situation that everyone in the growing crowd recognized. Sarah's heart pounded against her chest, but she kept her phone steady, still recording everything. "Such a hot day today," Brady said with an evil smile. "Must be at least 85 degrees. Perfect weather for things to heat up." He flicked ash from his cigarette, letting it fall dangerously close to the spilled gasoline. The crowd had grown even larger now. Someone had set up a portable speaker, and Sarah could hear her live stream playing out loud. broadcasting her voice to everyone present. I'm being harassed by Officers Brady and Martinez of the Millbrook Police Department. They've deliberately spilled gasoline around my vehicle and are creating a life-threatening situation. Tanya, Sarah's assistant, was frantically waving her arms from behind the police line. The fire department is 2 minutes away. I can hear them coming. Several other voices joined in, warning about the danger of the lit cigarette near the gas. Officer Martinez laughed, a harsh sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. Well, looks like your fancy Mercedes might not make it home today. He kicked the empty gas can, sending it rolling under Sarah's car. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. 30 seconds away, I can see the crowd. Hold on, baby. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as she watched Officer Brady through her side mirror. The young Officer Thompson finally found his voice. Sir, this isn't protocol. We should wait for. Before he could finish, Brady turned sharply. You want to lose your job, rookie? Thompson fell silent, his face pale with conflict and fear. Suddenly, Brady's cigarette slipped from his fingers. Time seemed to slow down as Sarah watched it fall, the burning end tumbling through the air. The cigarette landed in the pool of gasoline, and for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a whoosh, flames erupted around her car. The heat was immediate and intense. Sarah's survival instincts kicked in, and she threw her door open, scrambling away from the burning vehicle. She kept her phone recording even as she ran, capturing the officers' surprised faces. They hadn't expected her to escape so quickly. Oh my God! Screams erupted from the crowd. People backed away from the growing flames, but their phones stayed up, recording everything. The fire spread rapidly, feeding on the deliberately spilled gasoline. I guess you should have cooperated, Brady said loudly, but his voice shook slightly. The situation had escalated beyond even his twisted plans, and the flames were growing larger than expected. Just then, a sleek black SUV came tearing around the corner, tires screeching. It pulled up sharply, and Marcus Johnson stepped out, his imposing figure radiating fury. He was still wearing his court suit, his law firm badge clearly visible. Sarah, he called out, running toward his wife. Then his eyes locked onto the burning car, and his expression turned to one of cold rage. Which one of you is Brady? He demanded, his voice carrying across the chaos. The officers' faces changed instantly. Brady's cigarette pack disappeared into his pocket, and Martinez took several steps back. Even in the heat of the fire, they could feel the temperature drop from Marcus's icy stare. I'm Marcus Johnson, civil rights attorney, he announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. And you just committed a federal crime in front of dozens of witnesses. The fire department's sirens were getting closer, their lights visible now at the end of the street. Sarah ran to Marcus, still holding her phone steady. I got everything on video, she said, her voice shaking but strong. The whole thing is live-streamed. Officer Brady's arrogance finally cracked. His face went pale as he realized the full implications of what he'd done. The crowd was chanting now. We saw everything. We saw everything. Marcus pulled out his own phone, dialing quickly. This is Marcus Johnson. I need to speak to Judge Thompson immediately. Yes, it's an emergency. We have officers who just committed arson in broad daylight. The fire trucks arrived, their sirens wailing as firefighters jumped into action. But the damage was done, not just to Sarah's car, but to any illusion of authority these corrupt officers thought they had. As the flames rose higher, Sarah stood protected in her husband's arms, knowing that justice would soon be served. Marcus Johnson stood tall in his charcoal gray suit, his presence commanding immediate attention. At 6'2", with broad shoulders and a reputation as one of the city's most feared civil rights attorneys, he was an imposing figure. The gold pin on his lapel, marking 15 years of winning cases against police misconduct, gleamed in the firelight. Officer Brady, Marcus called out, his deep voice carrying across the chaos. Badge number 4471. Officer Martinez, badge number 4856. And Officer Thompson, badge number 5021. Every one of you will be named in this lawsuit. He wasn't asking for their information. He was telling them he already knew everything about them. The firefighters worked to control the blaze while Marcus pulled out his iPad, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Judge Thompson, yes, I'm still here. I'm watching three of your city's finest commit felony arson in broad daylight. He paused, listening. Yes, Your Honor, I have over 2,000 live stream viewers as witnesses. Officer Brady's arrogant smirk had completely vanished. He fumbled with his radio. Dispatch, we need a supervisor at. Oh, now you want a supervisor? Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as steel. Where was that supervisor when my wife requested one 10 minutes ago? He turned to the crowd, his lawyer's training taking over. Is anyone here willing to provide witness statements? At least 30 hands shot up immediately. Tanya, Sarah's assistant, stepped forward with her tablet. I have the entire incident recorded from 3 different angles, Mr. Johnson. Started recording the moment I saw them harassing Sarah. The sound of more sirens filled the air as 3 more police cars arrived, followed by a black SUV with internal affairs plates. Officer Brady's face turned ash white. Martinez started backing away, but Marcus's voice stopped him cold. Don't even think about leaving the scene of a crime, Officer Martinez. That's another felony charge I'd be happy to add to the list. Marcus's words weren't a threat. They were a promise. A tall woman in a crisp suit stepped out of the Internal Affairs vehicle. I'm Captain Lisa Rodriguez, Internal Affairs. Her sharp eyes took in the scene, the burning car, the spilled gas can, the crowd of witnesses with their phones still recording. Captain Rodriguez, Marcus nodded, maintaining his professional demeanor. I believe you remember me from the Williams case last summer? The captain's slight flinch showed she remembered exactly who he was. The Williams case had led to 5 officers being fired and criminal charges filed. Sarah stepped forward, her phone still recording. I have the entire incident documented, Captain. From the moment they pulled me over without cause, through Officer Brady deliberately dropping his lit cigarette in the gasoline Officer Martinez spilled around my car. The young Officer Thompson suddenly broke ranks. I want to make a statement, he stammered. What they did, it wasn't right. I should have stopped them. Brady tried to grab Thompson's arm, but Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. Officer Brady, if you touch him, I'll add witness intimidation to the charges. Step back. The crowd murmured in approval as Brady's hand dropped to his side. Marcus turned to address the growing crowd, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. If anyone here posted videos online, please don't delete them. My office will need copies for evidence. Also, I'll need contact information from anyone willing to testify. The fire was finally under control, but Sarah's Mercedes was destroyed. Marcus wrapped a protective arm around his wife, but his eyes never left the officers. Captain Rodriguez, I expect these officers' badges and guns to be surrendered immediately. They demonstrated they're willing to risk civilian lives to satisfy their power trip. Sarah's phone buzzed with notifications. Marcus, she whispered, the video has gone viral. It's already got over 50,000 views. Marcus nodded grimly. Good, the whole world needs to see this. He turned back to Captain Rodriguez. I'm giving your department 1 hour to make the right decision. After that, I'm taking this to every news station in the state. The captain nodded, her face grim. She turned to the 3 officers, her decision already made. Badges and guns. Now, you're all on administrative leave pending investigation. As the officers surrendered their weapons, Marcus held Sarah close. The crowd had started chanting again. Justice. Justice. But this was just the beginning. Marcus Johnson had built his career on cases like this, and he knew exactly what to do next. The next morning, Sarah and Marcus sat in the conference room of Johnson Law offices, surrounded by screens showing news coverage of the incident. Every major network was running the story. Police officers set woman's car on fire in shocking act of misconduct. Sarah's live stream had reached over 2 million views overnight. Look at this, Marcus's assistant, James, rushed in with his laptop. The police chief is about to make a public statement. They turned up the volume on the largest screen, where Police Chief Richardson stood at a podium looking stressed and tired. The Millbrook Police Department is deeply disturbed by the events that occurred yesterday, the chief began, sweat visible on his forehead. Officers Brady, Martinez, and Thompson have been placed on immediate unpaid leave. We are fully cooperating with the FBI's civil rights investigation. Sarah watched quietly, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since yesterday, calls from news stations, messages of support, and even celebrities sharing her story. The boutique's social media followers had tripled overnight. Marcus was in full lawyer mode, his desk covered with papers. "Chief Richardson is scared," he commented, typing rapidly on his computer. "He knows this is bigger than just one incident. We've received calls from 6 other victims of Brady and Martinez this morning alone." The office door opened, and Tanya walked in with more evidence. "Sarah, look at this." The corner store's security camera caught everything too. She played the footage, which showed a clear view of Brady dropping the cigarette deliberately. The store owner said he's willing to testify. Marcus nodded approvingly. "Perfect. That makes 47 witnesses so far." He turned to Sarah, his expression softening. "How are you holding up, honey?" Before Sarah could answer, James rushed back in. "Mr. Johnson, CNN wants to interview you both. They're offering a prime-time slot tonight." He paused, checking his tablet. "And the governor just tweeted about the incident." Sarah stood up, walking to the window. Outside, a small group of protesters had gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for Sarah" and "Stop Police Brutality." Local news vans lined the street, their reporters doing live broadcasts. The insurance company called, Tanya reported, checking her notes. They've approved an immediate replacement for Sarah's car. They're also joining the lawsuit against the police department. Marcus smiled grimly. "Good, but this isn't about the car anymore." He walked over to a whiteboard where he had written out their strategy. "This is about systemic change. Brady and Martinez have been doing this for years. We're going to expose everything." Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Officer Thompson's lawyer. "Marcus, look at this," she said, holding out her phone. "Thompson wants to make a full statement. He's willing to testify about other incidents he witnessed." The room fell silent as Marcus read the message. This was huge. A police officer breaking the blue wall of silence could crack the whole case wide open. Called his lawyer back, Marcus decided. "Tell them we'll meet in 1 hour." He turned to his team. "James, get me everything you can find on Brady and Martinez's past complaints. Tanya, start organizing the witness statements. We need everything perfect for the federal investigation." Sarah watched her husband work, feeling proud and determined. The destruction of her car had sparked something much bigger than they expected. Her social media was flooded with messages from other victims of police misconduct, finally feeling brave enough to speak out. The TV was still running in the background, showing footage of her burning Mercedes. But now there were interviews with legal experts, civil rights leaders, and reform advocates. What started as one horrible incident was turning into a movement. "Marcus," Sarah said softly, "we need to help them all." She gestured to the stack of messages from other victims. "Not just me. Everyone who's been afraid to speak up." Marcus stopped typing and looked at his wife with pride. Even after everything she'd been through, she was thinking of others. He walked over and hugged her tightly. "We will, baby. That's exactly what we're going to do." He turned to address his team. "Starting today, Johnson Law Offices is taking on every credible police misconduct case in this city, free of charge." The room erupted in determined activity. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and papers shuffled. This wasn't just about justice for Sarah anymore. It was about changing the system that had protected bad officers for too long. 1 week after the incident, the Johnson Law Offices had transformed into a hub of intense activity. The large conference room looked more like a command center, with maps on the walls showing pins of similar police incidents, dozens of screens displaying news updates, and teams of lawyers working around the clock. Sarah sat at the head of the conference table, listening to Officer Thompson's recorded testimony. The young officer's voice shook as he revealed years of misconduct by Brady and Martinez. They called it street justice. Thompson's voice played through the speakers. They targeted successful minorities specifically, said it was to keep them in their place. "I saw them plant evidence at least 15 times." Marcus paced the room, his tie loosened after another long day. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, stopping the recording. "Thompson's testimony breaks open every case they've handled in the past 5 years." The door burst open as James rushed in with breaking news. "Turn on Channel 7. Brady's wife is giving an interview." Everyone grabbed their phones to record as Brady's wife appeared on screen, tears in her eyes. "I can't stay silent anymore. Mrs. Brady said to the reporter. Keith has been abusing his power for years. I have videos, text messages, everything. He bragged about targeting innocent people, especially successful black business owners like Mrs. Johnson. Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. The FBI had just announced they were expanding their investigation to include the entire Millbrook Police Department. Photos showed federal agents carrying boxes of files from police headquarters. Look at these numbers, Tanya said, bringing up a spreadsheet on the main screen. We've received over 300 complaints about Brady and Martinez. 80% of their traffic stops were minorities driving expensive cars. Marcus nodded grimly. And that's just the people brave enough to come forward. He turned to the team of lawyers. I want every single case reviewed by tomorrow. These officers didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone was protecting them. The protests outside had grown larger over the week. Now, instead of dozens, there were thousands. People came from neighboring states to join the movement. Signs read, "No more bad apples," and "Reform the system." Sarah's boutique had become a symbol of resistance. Women drove for hours just to shop there, showing support. The store's Instagram following had reached 500,000. Every purchase came with a Justice First pin that Sarah had designed. Marcus, Sarah called out, looking at her tablet. The mayor just announced an emergency city council meeting. They're voting on police reform tonight. She paused, reading further. And they want us both to speak. The room erupted in excited chatter. This was unprecedented. The city council usually took months to act on anything, but the pressure from the public, the media, and the federal investigation had forced their hand. James printed out the latest statistics. Complaints against police had dropped 70% since Brady and Martinez were suspended. Other officers, seeing what happened, were suddenly following proper procedures. Body cameras were mysteriously no longer malfunctioning. We got them cornered, Marcus announced to the room. But this isn't just about two bad officers anymore. We're going to change the whole system. He pointed to the wall of cases they collected. Every victim gets justice. Every corrupt officer gets exposed. No exceptions. Sarah stood up, walking to the window. The crowd below had started singing, "We Shall Overcome." News helicopters circled overhead, capturing the scene for national broadcasts. She saw people of all races standing together, demanding change. The insurance company delivered my new car today, Sarah said quietly, but I think I'll drive the old backup car for now. Every time someone sees the burned Mercedes on the news, it reminds them why we're fighting. Marcus wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You've become a symbol, baby. Your courage that day, staying calm, recording everything, you showed people they can fight back legally. Tanya approached with more updates. CNN's interview got 12 million views. The GoFundMe for police reform has raised over $2 million. And look at this, police departments in 3 other states have started investigations into similar incidents. The room fell quiet as everyone realized the magnitude of what they'd started. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. The burning of Sarah's car had lit a different kind of fire, one that was spreading across the country, burning away years of injustice and silence. Marcus checked his watch. The city council meeting starts in 2 hours. Sarah, are you ready to tell your story again? Sarah straightened her shoulders, determination in her eyes. I'll tell it as many times as it takes, until every bad officer learns that they can't get away with this anymore. 6 months after the burning car incident, Sarah and Marcus Johnson stood on the steps of City Hall, surrounded by cameras and supporters. The morning sun shone bright as Mayor Thompson prepared to sign the Sarah Johnson Police Accountability Act into law. This is a historic day for our city, the mayor announced, his voice carrying across the crowded plaza. Thanks to Mrs. Johnson's courage and Mr. Johnson's relentless pursuit of justice, we now have the strongest police reform law in the country. Sarah, dressed in an elegant blue suit from her boutique, looked out at the sea of faces. She recognized many of them. Witnesses from that day, other victims who'd come forward, supporters who'd stood with them through months of fighting. Her boutique's Justice First pins sparkled on hundreds of lapels. The changes had been sweeping and dramatic. Officers Brady and Martinez were now serving 10-year sentences for civil rights violations, arson, and abuse of power. Officer Thompson, after testifying against his former colleagues, had become an instructor at the police academy, teaching new recruits about ethical policing. The numbers don't lie, Marcus said to the gathered reporters, holding up a chart. Since implementing our reforms 3 months ago, complaints against police have dropped by 90%. Every officer now wears a camera that can't be turned off. Every traffic stop is reviewed by civilian oversight. The police chief, newly appointed after the old one resigned in disgrace, stepped forward. She was the first black woman to hold the position in the city's history. Thanks to the Johnson Reform Fund, our officers now receive triple the training hours in de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. We've fired 28 officers for misconduct and rebuilt trust with our community. Sarah's phone buzzed, another message from one of the thousands of people she'd helped. Her social media following had grown to over 2 million. Her boutique had expanded to 3 locations, each serving as a safe space where people could report police misconduct. But the biggest change, Sarah spoke into the microphones, is that people aren't afraid anymore. When I stood my ground that day, recording everything, I showed others they could fight back legally. Knowledge is power, and now everyone knows their rights. Marcus nodded proudly. His law firm had grown from 5 lawyers to 50, all dedicated to civil rights cases. They'd won settlements for over 200 victims of police misconduct, but more importantly, they changed department policies across the state. The Sarah Johnson Act has 3 main parts. Mayor Thompson explained to the crowd. First, any officer who intentionally violates a citizen's civil rights faces mandatory jail time. Second, the police department's budget now includes millions for community programs and training. Third, a civilian review board has real power to fire officers and press charges. Tanya, now the manager of all 3 boutique locations, stood nearby with tears in her eyes. Remember when it was just us recording with our phones? She whispered to Sarah. Now look, we changed everything. The crowd cheered as the mayor signed the bill into law. Confetti filled the air, and someone started singing "The Change Is Gonna Come." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand, remembering how far they'd come from that terrifying day with her burning car. And we're not done yet, Marcus announced, holding up another stack of papers. Today, we're launching the National Police Accountability Project. 10 other cities have already agreed to adopt our reforms. By this time next year, we'll have changed police departments across America. Sarah stepped to the microphone one last time. To every officer who thinks they can abuse their power, remember my story. To every citizen afraid to stand up for their rights, remember my story. And to every person who thinks one voice can't make a difference, remember my story. The crowd erupted in applause. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the ceremony nationwide. On social media, hashtag Sarah Johnson Act was trending #1. Police reform activists around the country were already calling it the Sarah Johnson Revolution. As the ceremony ended, Sarah and Marcus walked down the city hall steps hand in hand. Where her burned Mercedes had once symbolized injustice, a new monument now stood, a bronze statue of a woman holding up a phone, the words, "Justice First," engraved on its base. "You did it, baby," Marcus said softly. "You really did it." Sarah smiled, watching more people pin on Justice First badges. "No," she corrected him, "we did it. All of us together, and we're just getting started." Above them, the sun shone bright on a new day of justice, reform, and hope for a better future.